Really glad to have everybody here with us today on Election Science Office Hours, which is a webinar and podcast that's hosted by the Lynn Center for Science, Society, and Policy, also known as LCSSP, here at Caltech, and moderated by me, Michael Alvarez. Our Election Science Office Hours archive has almost 30 episodes, which are listed on the Democracy and Elections section of the Lynn Center's brand new website at https the usual stuff, lcssp.caltech.edu, and on our YouTube channel and Spotify and Apple Podcast playlist. Yeah, just to emphasize, we do have a new website, which we launched in December. So in addition to that, please follow us on social media. The LCSSP is on LinkedIn, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook. And again, as I mentioned before, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A area down on Zoom, and we'll do our best to try to answer those as time allows. Now, today, this is going to be really fun. I'm really excited about the conversation today because I've got two folks with us today. And first, let me introduce Michael Specter, who's the Assistant Professor of Computer Science and Cybersecurity and Privacy at Georgia Tech. Professor Specter's research focuses on system security and applied cryptography, particularly in areas relevant to public policy, like elections. Topics of interest for him include surveillance, cryptographic accountability, content moderation, misinformation, and election security. He started at Georgia Tech in 2023 from Google, where he was a research scientist studying Android security and privacy. He earned his PhD from MIT in 2021, where he was a member of the Internet Policy Research Initiative and the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab. Professor Specter is joined by Delaney Gomen, a PhD student in computer science at Georgia Tech, who works with Professor Specter and conducts research on his team. Delaney's broadly interested in solving problems in security and privacy that undermine democratic society. Her approach focuses on applying concepts from the field of usable privacy and security to issues, again, public policy and law, areas relevant to elections and election science. Right now, that means that she's largely looking at human factors issues in election security to prevent harms towards election officials and improve trust in elections. She has a background working in the intersection of technology and democracy, first as a data science at the nonprofit organization Protect Democracy for their Vote Shield project, and most recently as a governance and technology fellow at the Carter Center. Before this, she got her BS in statistics from the University of Florida and was a member of the University of Florida Election Data Sciences Lab. So a lot of intersections with data science over the years. So let's get right into this conversation. Michael and Delaney, welcome, and thank you both for joining me today.
Excited to be here.
Hello.
So, Michael, let's start with you. We first met when you were a grad student at MIT, and you were working, with Ron Rivest and working on some election science topics, election security topics at the time. What originally got you excited about working on voting systems and voting technology then?
Wow. Yeah, that was like 6 years ago at this point. It's making me feel old. So there's just two reasons why I got invested into like elections technology and doing research in this field. And the first is sort of abstract, and there's sort of more the direct, like day-to-day reasons. So abstractly, the thing that I'm interested in is principally the continued existence of Western democracy. And us as technologists have introduced a lot of interesting technology to the world, and that has caused problems. It's solved a lot of problems. It's improved things. It's hurt other things, and it's kind of our responsibility to hack on things related to it. And I think it's incredibly important that we do so. And the second reason is that it's fun. And I don't think I have to tell you this, but properly running elections is probably one of the hardest socio-technical problems we have today, or challenges we have today. And there are really hard technical and policy problems that need to be solved here. Cryptography, statistics, usability, poli-sci, and public policy. These are all things that you can go for try to angles that you can use to go at like general problems here. And I really like these kind of interdisciplinary hard problem spaces.
Mhm. Yeah, they're difficult, challenging problems. I think as we both know. But I also wanted to just deviate a little for a couple of minutes or seconds to talk about Ron Rivest, who was one of your mentors and advisors. And he was one of the founders of the Caltech MIT Voting Technology Project. And he was, I think, on your thesis committee.
Mhm.
And Ron's a big, significant person in this field of election science. And he was really one of the early skeptics and people who taught me a lot about a lot of the issues and security issues and technology issues and usability issues, which we'll talk about later, in particular with online voting systems. He was also, really influential in the development of the concept of voter verifiable voting systems. He and Shuki Brook really pioneered some of the early work in that area. So, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with Ron and what you think Ron's contributions were to election science and election security?
It's it's kind of weird, or it's kind of funny from my perspective to hear Ron first being talked about as being influential in elections. If only because, if most people in my discipline in computer science probably know him from his contributions in cryptography, particularly public key cryptography. I doubt actually most people there will even know that he worked on elections.
Mhm.
And that's not saying that the work that he did isn't important. It's just funny to hear it because probably it's just like all of his other work is so impactful.
Mhm.
Um, so for elections in particular, I think the most important thing to me is he brought up this concept of software independence, right?
Mhm.
That the an undetectable change in software should not cause an undetectable change in the election outcome. And that concept alone is hugely impactful to the way in which we actually think about securing elections. He took a really sort of cryptographer's view of how should think about how to design an election system. And it's really exciting. There's a lot of really interesting problems that sort of stem out of that one principle. He's also done all of these other things like Bayesian audits, so a different way of providing ballot polling audits. He was also part of the team that deployed the first end-to-end verifiable voting system in Tacoma Park, which was really, really big. Working with him was really formative. One thing that I will say is that a really remarkable thing about Ron is beyond, he's Turing Award winner, which is basically a Nobel Prize in computer science, MIT Institute professor, started a company worth billions. And for all of that, you'd expect him to have like some ego or be, he has every right to, right? He has he deserves to be that a little bit at this point in his career. And honestly, he is the most understated, humble, and friendly, approachable guy. And for me, as a sort of baby graduate student talking to this legend, having that, be how you just interact with this human being, this legend, I had trouble even calling him by his like first name for like a while, right? And having this working relationship, and just the way that he behaves would really inspire me to try to do the same and try to be as approachable as I possibly can be, versus trying to put on a bold face or something like this.
Yeah, just to reiterate the last point, I mean, I met Ron sometime around probably 1998 or 1999 first, right before the Voting Technology Project was launched, because here in California, the issue of online voting came up, and around 1998, there was a committee that I was part of. And part of the early research that I was doing, just trying to understand some issues about the security of these kind of systems. Ron had already been writing and talking about it before then, and he just was so unique in his ability to be obviously a brilliant scientist, right? But also, like you said, to be somebody who's just eminently approachable, and also what we'll get to talking about is somebody who could actually talk to election officials, right, and listen to them and really was interested in learning about their concerns and their problems. And then going back to his lab and with students like you to really engaging folks and working on the real problems that election administration faced. So to pivot a little bit to kind of what you're doing right now at Georgia Tech, like how are you going about setting up a lab? How are you finding students like Delaney? How are you, recruiting and getting, your lab and your research group set up at Georgia Tech?
Yeah. So my lab has four students, six if you count visiting students who come and collaborate with us. And I'm incredibly lucky. It turns out that the problems that we're working on here are incredibly motivating to a lot of people. And the talent and ability, I'm honored to be working with any of them.
Mhm.
Honestly, it's amazing. We're an interdisciplinary crew. I have students that focus on computer science things, things like internet measurements, human-computer interactions, systems, cryptography, and the like. But also public policy folks, and I actually really do take that seriously. In fact, professor of public policy is actually comes to my group meetings and is part of my lab.
Mhm.
And we call ourselves the Security, Privacy, and Democracy Research Lab, or Spider Lab at Georgia Tech. And beyond elections, we work on topics that are also related to security and public policy. So it's a little bit more broad than just elections.
So
Um,
what have the challenges been?
yeah, it's going really well, despite these challenges. But it's a new group. Becoming a new assistant professor is hard. Uh, the current environment, especially on these topics, means that finding funding has been a little bit difficult.
Mhm.
But that just indicates to me that it's even more important that we actually do the work that we're doing.
Uh-huh.
So if folks out there want to partner with us, we're incredibly excited to do so. And actually, honestly, the best part of my job is that I get to work with these really fantastic people.
Mhm.
One of which we brought along today.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking. So now we can pivot to talking a little bit with Delaney. So tell us a little bit about yourself and in particular how you got interested in this area of elections and election technology.
Yeah, it's been quite a road. So I graduated college in the summer of 2020, and that's when I started at Vote Shield, which is a project at Protect Democracy that, in a large sense, monitors voter data with the goal of collaborating with election officials. And of course, 2020 was quite an election. And so on the data science team, our responsibility is pivoted briefly to providing support for the parent organization. So I was staring a lot into the void, investigating false claims, but also noticing that sometimes if claims weren't false, they were just largely misconstrued. And that's when I first started to notice this pattern of these minor, almost technical mistakes spiraling into situations that greatly undermine election integrity. And thinking with a little bit of a computer scientist brain at the time, thinking, what if these are actually simple problems to solve? And then another part of that as well was, our parent organization represented some election workers that were, victims of defamation and harassment. And I had the opportunity to go to NASED and engage with election officials one on one. And so I really got to understand their burdens and some of the challenges that they face, and realize these are people, and sometimes they're just people trying to do a job. And I think that perspective, wanting to bring that when I then entered computer science and met Mike as my advisor, it was really important to me to bring that perspective into computer science research in election security.
Mhm. So Caltech, or excuse me, Georgia Tech specifically, like what led you to specifically join Michael's lab at Georgia Tech?
It's a bit of a funny story. I started as a master's student because, having graduated in 2020, I kind of wanted to maybe take a break and explore um, different avenues. But um, that spring, before I enrolled, a paper had been circulating at Vote Shield, um, because it had mentioned Vote Shield. Someone had found it and said, "Hey, look, this mentions Vote Shield." And Mike happened to have been a co-author. So I tagged his name in my mind. And then when I saw he was teaching a seminar that semester, I enrolled, and the rest is history. Um, this was definitely a dream of mine to be able to independently pursue this research. I definitely developed a passion at my prior position, and being able to not only develop this research, but also expand it to other areas, not being, restricted to just one area is a dream.
So I can clearly see kind of the path here now that led to this research paper that we're going to talk about. Michael sent it to me just kind of out of the blue, I think. We were just emailing back and forth, and I just got this paper in my inbox, and I read it, and I'm like, this is really amazing stuff. And so that's really the inspiration for getting you both on to talk about it today. So can you kind of tell us about this research paper that, let's see, the title of it is, I don't want my vulnerability published. What if I can't fix it? Challenges in election security from the perspective of U.S. election officials. So can you kind of give us an overview for what you did in this paper and what you found?
Yes. So first, to explain the title for our audience, in human-computer interaction, when you do qualitative work, it's conventional to have the first part of the title be a quote from a participant. So I don't want my vulnerability published. What if I can't fix it? Is a quote that we got from one of our interview participants. But to take a step back and talk about the paper itself, the broadest summary of the paper, I would believe, is to provide a new perspective of election security rooted in the experiences of election officials. In computer science, we often focus on the machine. I can even quote Gabriel Sterling, state election official in Georgia, in a podcast a couple years ago, saying computer experts focus solely on the computer. And so this research asks, well, what if computer scientists didn't focus solely on the computer? And that's what we do. Through a qualitative analysis, is where we analyze interview data that we conducted with 14 election officials, and supplemented with the open survey responses of 45, I believe, election officials from all over the country. We provide this argument that the usability of election tools can undermine security assumptions. And we also provide evidence and context of the digital harms election officials face and how that can even affect election security as well. And in my discipline, we would consider this an exploratory analysis. So what that means is we're really trying to present a problem in an empirical way for the community to go out and hopefully expand this work.
Mm-hmm. So Michael, anything you want to add?
Yeah. So in security, in particular, computer security, very often, first of all, that's a fantastic summary. Great job. Second of all, in computer security, we generally focus on casting and tallying, right? So the focus is on the person walking into a polling booth and actually pressing a button or delivering a ballot, and it's because it's a really sort of attractive cryptographic problem, right? The secret ballot is a really interesting thing. But that's not all of elections. And we know this, but computer scientists generally don't. And the point being that focusing on tools and tooling that elections officials use can yield a whole slew of other problems and interesting issues that we should also be focusing on, is not a thing that has been talked about much, at least in our discipline. And we're trying to bring people back into that a little bit.
So, Delaney, so you said our community. Now, when you say or my community, are you thinking computer science, or are you thinking more specifically HCI? Or what do you think of as your community and the community that this research is really focused on?
Yes, I'm such a young academic. I hesitate to say I'm part of any community right now. But I do mean more specifically, when I talk about conventions of this paper, it is usually rooted in HCI. But when I say our community, I also just mean generally computer scientists. But yes, some of the conventions in this work that you might not see in other cybersecurity work or even political science work, it typically is particular to HCI.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, as you probably have already found, as academics, we do sometimes have to pin ourselves down, even when we're working in these highly interdisciplinary areas. Because I resist these categorizations too, just like you do. I don't like being called a scientist necessarily.
But what's interesting about this work is that it's like HCI work, HCI methodology targeted to the computer security community. and attempting to be published in a computer securities venue, which is interesting.
Okay, so can we talk about the HCI methodology a little bit because it's I'm familiar with it. I have a postdoc who works a lot in HCI, so I understand it. But I think folks in the elections community may not really understand when you say HCI methodology and we say qualitative work, what that means. Can you walk through the methodology?
Yes. So there are different types of qualitative approaches. The HCI community employs them all. You have your more traditional, I would say, social science qualitative methods that focus on intercoder reliability and develop a hypothesis. And then there's what we call this exploratory work that is more rooted almost in sociology, using thematic analysis. And the benefit of this approach is that you don't have to rely on frequencies, and you can highlight themes that are important, but not necessarily the most prevalent. And we found that was really appropriate for our use case because of the risk tolerance of elections. So if we're seeing even a small subset of our interviewees encountering a major problem, we want to be able to share that. And in some qualitative methods, that's not allowed as much. So what we do is we interview everybody. We have all their transcripts anonymized and reviewed, and we took great pains to anonymize these data sets, including erring on the side of caution when we remove vendor names, using they, them pronouns for all our participants. We got a certificate of confidentiality from the National Institute of Health, which I didn't even know you could do for social science. Which also protects our data from further legal investigation. And then once all the data is de-anonymized, you're iteratively going through and you're highlighting major themes. And the exact technique we use, called thematic analysis, is really all about iteration. And as I would consider myself kind of a expert in this field, a single coder with an advisor such as Mike is acceptable, because the goal of the work is to just find signals that are relevant to an academic community and share those. And we follow in a tradition of several other works that have kind of sprung up in the security community, focused on victims of abuse, journalists, healthcare workers. And these have all led to very large, very significant research areas. And so it seemed like election officials, I mean, they check a lot of those boxes, right? Political targets like journalists, overburdened like healthcare workers, victims of abuse. So it seems like a really good fit to start applying these research methodologies to this population.
So, how did you get people to participate, or election officials to participate in a study like this?
Great mentors and advisors. Building
Flattery will get you
trust.
everywhere.
Yes, a major takeaway of this work that we want to emphasize to the audience we're trying to target is the importance of building trust in the election community. They are understandably very guarded, and especially towards computer scientists. Mike loves this anecdote. It's going to be in a future version of the paper, but one of our survey responders, when we asked if they would like to participate or collaborate with computer science in the future, they basically said yes, unless you're, and they named a cybersecurity researcher, quite a prominent one. And so we understand that there are these tensions here, but we have to emphasize that you really have to get on their level and want to talk to them as people.
It was heartening. We have found the community to be incredibly welcoming in a bunch of different ways. So a lot of people actually volunteered to talk to us and help out. And once we used snowball sampling, so we were able to, once we got one or two people, we were able to ask them to help us get other people, and that actually ended up working out fairly well.
So I don't know if we would call it a sample, but the group of people that you talk to, are they mainly state level election officials, or they're county election officials, or is there a mixture?
They're mainly county. And I wanted to focus on county first. We did interview 2 state election officials, of different states to provide sort of a check on what we are finding on the local level. But yes, they're mostly local and they're mostly directors or assistant directors.
So they're actually people who are actually engaged in using the technology and working closely with the people who are actually implementing elections on election day, namely the poll workers, right?
Yes, yes. And we try to also get a range of those folks as well. We have people who are very, very active in modernizing elections. And then one of my favorite participants was a snowball sample who didn't know what to do. She had known our prior participant because she was just getting into modernizing her office, single worker, right? So we really try to get a broad range of both what I would consider are the active election officials, and we know who those are, but also trying to really dig deep and get those election officials in sparse counties that don't really engage as much.
Exactly. Okay. Yes, I'm going to have to stop asking all the detailed questions about I'm really curious about to really because I want to talk about the findings. So can you all give us a kind of overview of what you think the important findings are and what those implications are from your study?
Yeah, so I think a really interesting kind of thread of argument that I want this paper to kind of start promoting is this idea that usability failures are directly related to election trust. We talk about how do we improve election trust, and there seems to be a very low hanging fruit with counteracting these usability issues that computer scientists have a very long history of fixing in other domains. And that's without burdening election officials with more technology. That's figuring out when it works and when it doesn't, which is a very important distinction. I think another implication is that many assumptions that we make when we talk about provably secure elections can be violated just by simple human error. And so making sure that when we devise a secure election system, we bring in what parts the human are involved in, I think would be is a huge implication of this work. Um, there's another thread of logic that comes from human error is that it causes misinformation, which also undermines integrity, but also causes harm to election workers, makes them victims of harassment and abuse. And I would hope my biggest goal for this work is that it doesn't necessarily change the community. It just makes it larger. It introduces new computer scientists into this problem. I think the cryptographers and cybersecurity researchers that are always going to be focused on finding vulnerabilities and kind of tinkering with the hardware, they have their place and they should stay. But we should instead just make it a bigger community with more computer scientists who are interested in the human factors.
So to give you an example, one of the results, we have this survey that we sent out along with the interview. So we did an interview and then we like this more easily accessible, just, hey, here's a Qualtrics survey. One of the things that we found, one of the questions that we asked was, hey, have you seen preventable mistakes that could cause confusion with the public? Were these preventable mistakes, if left uncaught, could they cause an unrecoverable change in the outcome of the election? And we found that 20% of our respondents said that yes, they have seen preventable mistakes that could cause an undetectable change in the outcome of the election. Some of the stories that we had were particularly illuminating. One of the ones that I don't think made it into the paper was we were talking to somebody and they said, yeah, there was this training issue where one of my idiot subordinates didn't know that if you didn't install a memory card into the ballot scanner, that the ballot scanner will happily scan the ballots for you anyway, without having anywhere to write the results down to. And to him, this was like, this was a failure of the system, or this was a failure of the training of this person's ability to know what to do. From my perspective, why is this machine allowing you to do this, right? Very clearly, the machine shouldn't be executing. It should be alerting the user if there is some way that they're not actually going to be doing the full task of what they should be doing. So there's a design failure here in the usability sense. And doing more in-depth analysis is probably going to be yield more issues.
So when I looked at the paper, I noticed that a lot of it is about, well, actually two different populations, right? There's a lot of conversation about these usability problems with technology and simple mistakes that arise, let's say just in the election administration back office, right? But there's also a lot of conversation in the paper, and clearly these conversations really surface a lot of problems that the election officials are identifying with respect to subordinates or in particular poll workers, right? And the problem with the poll workers is really extreme in the sense that, you train them and they go off and on election day, they do their own thing and there's not easy ways to supervise what they're doing. And you have to assume that the training really covers all of the possible things that can come up on election day. Did you find, in particular, focusing on the poll workers and how they're implementing election day voting with technology, was there something that really jumped out at you that is a kind of a simple technological issue or mistake, as you're talking about, that is something simple that can easily be fixed?
I think something that comes up quite often are error messages on scanners and poll pads. So there were many examples to include in the paper, but often only one makes it. But dealing with a poll pad and having a confusing error message, and combined with, and this is why the human factors of this work is so important, combined with a lot of poll workers being quite senior in their experience and thinking they know what to do and not communicating an IT person or their election official, and then erroneously fixing the error in a way that must be resolved. So I think the example in the paper is on a poll pad check-in, which led to an off by one error at the end of the day. But I've seen it also with scanners, ballot jams, card not read. It seems like a pretty simple fix to provide more intuitive error messages, other than error with a bunch of numbers and some obscure title.
There's also like issues that we saw with safety. So, and by safety, I mean sort of in the HCI sense. So, the most common example of providing safety is you have a recycle bin on your computer, and it asks you multiple times before you permanently delete an object, right? And it ensures that there's some sort of sane like description of how you're supposed to react, right? Hitting that cancel button means something. Hitting OK and consent means something. There are many instances of systems not providing that to the user before something happens. For example, marking a voter as having voted, for example. This is not a thing where there's a lot of dialogue that would actually stop you from accidentally marking somebody in one way or another.
I was struck as well, to talk about safety. I was struck as well by how much the election officials that you talk to, how much they stress their own and their own physical safety and their own physical security and that of the people who work for them. Was there something in these interviews that really jumped out at you again as something that is if we're thinking about 2026 in terms of physical security and physical safety of the people who are running elections in the US, things that maybe one or two things that might be easy to fix or easy to try to address?
Yeah, so our focus on physical security was really in the context of we were asking them about their digital security, and they would just start talking about their physical security. And I think that is not really in my wheelhouse, but I did see that New York Times article about the cute bomb dogs being deployed at polling locations. And they are very, very aware of their physical security. But for their digital security, it was very interesting because I'm familiar with the Brennan Center's annual local election worker poll, which stated that I think over a third of election officials has reported receiving some sort of harassment digitally. And they were not as aware of the digital protections that they need, or as aware of digital safety standards as they were for their physical standards. So I think there's almost an over reliance on physical safety. I mean, they I guess you can never have an over reliance, but everyone had some sort of new bulletproof wall installed, some sort of emergency hotline. cameras in their house, pepper spray, etc. But not as much two-factor authentication. In fact, only one participant mentioned personally using two-factor authentication. Digital security at the office and digital security at home were often viewed as separate entities. That you cannot bring those lessons at the office home with you, which was even more surprising. We had people validate kind of the Brennan Center's findings by saying, yes, I know someone who's been hacked and it was politically targeted. Yes, I know someone who has been harassed online or even had their own crazy experiences with people trying to contact them and harass them. So yeah, on physical safety, I think the takeaway of the paper is that they are very concerned about it, but it might be at the cost of their own digital safety.
Another, like, to add on to that, there's also this issue of like threat modeling, like how we should think about elections integrity as a problem. If it is at the point where people are going to be concerned about their physical safety, you also need to worry about things like insider threat and adversaries having physical access to systems, whether or not the election official can be coerced into doing things, and whether or not there are good defenses against that. It was incredibly distressing to hear the stories that people were telling of, I was in a Walmart and somebody was like yelling at me and screaming at me for how I was behaving. I heard stories of just like even childish level of physical harassment that these people who are helping people vote, making sure that people can vote, are critical to our democratic process, are having to deal with right now.
One participant, oh, sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
One participant mentioned how her constituents had started to share their their personal phone number. And they had been receiving calls on the weekends asking about election integrity and security. So just a complete invasion of their personal privacies at times and their digital privacy.
So simple thing, don't give out your personal phone number.
Yeah. And a separate participant mentioned being more mindful about revealing their phone number to places, but that was the only one.
Yeah, I mean, I know these concerns are really, really rampant in the community, and I think they're justified. One thing on these kind of security issues and threat issues that you surfaced that also struck you. Now, maybe they came up and you didn't talk about it in your paper, but in 2025, we had two conferences that really focused on how AI is changing elections here in the U.S. And the second one really focused a lot on how election officials are or are not using AI tools. And I was surprised that AI didn't really come up in your paper, but I was wondering, did that surface in the conversations? I mean, are they concerned about AI threats to their election administration practices? Are you concerned about anything you heard about how they're using AI tools in election administration?
Only a few participants mentioned exploring AI. At the time, I mean, we did these interviews in last year, so it wasn't like the AI boom hadn't happened yet. But I don't think that there was widespread adoption. Now, we do have data that we are considering analyzing for a different venue, focused on what tools they use outside of their election suite. And there's a lot of potential for AI use, generative AI use. They have to use a lot of creative tools actually in their daily job. They're managing sometimes the entire suite of information that they're by law required to share. I think AI will become especially prevalent in large communities. Again, because we're trying to be so sensitive about locations and there are only a few jurisdictions in the US that are of a certain size. I don't want to share too much, but the only person who had explored using AI was one of those very large jurisdictions in the US.
I think my biggest concern with AI moving forward in elections is the use of it, or the problems with having a system that is probabilistic give you information about the world, right? And it potentially not being correct. So you could imagine, I don't know, some AI system saying something that's incorrect about polling places, that's incorrect about how elections administration is done, that's incorrect about how the election was conducted, and that result ending up persuading people to go to the wrong polling place in a practical sense, or going to the wrong location. I know that, for example, there's whole teams at Google that provide that interoperate with local places for elections like that, or elections or events like this, to be able to provide correct information. And now we have a series of systems that people might be using in order to get their information. Are they going to be prepared? Is ChatGPT, right? Is OpenAI going to be prepared to provide accurate information to a user about the systems and the place that they're dealing with, right? Um, it's really concerning. I don't remember much other than what Delaney said about elections officials themselves using AI for things.
Well, it's an emerging, I think it's an emerging issue that I think we're all going to have to pay attention to.
Mhm.
Now, gosh, we've been talking for 40 minutes and I could keep going on, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the more general issue of trust that we've kind of hit a couple of times here. And Michael in particular, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what your understanding of the kind of 2+ decade history is between election officials and computer scientists, and what happened to trust between computer scientists and election officials over that maybe 2 decade period of time.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I'm not going to lie, right? There's a long history of distrust between computer security researchers like myself and elections officials, and this is a thing that I hope that my group and the research that we're doing can help solve.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of this actually started with HAVA, with the Help America Vote Act. And for listeners who don't know, right, this is a bill that put a lot of money into elections after the 2000 election, trying to modernize elections processes, voting processes. And what this ended up really doing is dumping a lot of money onto states who then went off to buy what are called DRE, or electronic only voting systems. And those electronic only voting systems were bad, right? They had unsolvable computer security problems. And a number of us academics, of us security researchers, went off and demonstrated how broken they were. Um, and ultimately, most of these systems are actually gone now. We use most systems that Americans vote on actually print out the ballot after the fact. So there's this hardware-backed, unhackable, right, piece of paper, right, where you can sit and actually look and confirm that your ballot was correct. It has the software independence property that Ron talked about. Um, and this is arguably like a victory, right? This is a great thing, right? This is a service that academics did that eventually resulted in elections being improved in the real world. But during this process, the vendors kind of fought the idea tooth and nail. The computer scientists fought back. And in all this fighting, these poor elections officials were kind of caught in the crossfire dealing with this. And it's, two things can be true, right? The first thing can be that election systems need to be modernized, analyzed, and security researchers need to be able to provide feedback on this. And it's also true that it's now time for more collaboration with elections officials. And the sort of big problem that I see is this sort of doom spiral in election security, where vendors develop a thing that solves some problem for elections officials. Elections officials go off and adopt this system, largely without contacting or discussing this with the security community. Someone in the security community sees this, and this ends up getting on their to-do list. As a result of that, the system is found to be broken in such and such a way. Us CS nerds publish a paper and then disappear into the ether. And the elections officials then take all of this heat, right? All this bad press, all these lawsuits. And then the next time a vendor tries to sell them on a product that actually solves a huge problem they're having, they're then not going to talk to us. So we're back in the same position we're in. In fact, it's worse now, right? Because there's this bad blood. And I think that the only real, and I don't blame them for this. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, right, the elections official has to get a job done. They have to make sure that the people can vote. So they're going to end up, working with the voting system vendor a lot more. And the only way that I think we can solve this problem is to either have some sort of legislation that introduces the security folks at the beginning of the process, when before a new system is adopted, to try to help set standards and help give information to the elections official, or de-escalate.
Mhm.
Make it so that people feel comfortable coming to us, and that we're not going to just go out and try to give them lawsuits and bad press. We're actually going to give them advice and help them. Uh, and that's sort of part of the motivation for all of this work that we're doing, is to try to get us earlier on to into the cycle.
Well, let me ask you specifically about the vote study that you were part of, because I think that was one of the first times I ever got to know you because of that study
Mhm.
that you did. You did that a few years back. It was, I think from many election officials' perspectives, it was one of these kinds of studies, right?
Yeah.
And in retrospect, thinking back on it and thinking, maybe in the context of some of the work that you've recently been doing in these conversations, would you have done it differently if you were trying to do it today, a study like that?
So, for those of you who are listening who don't know, there was a system called Votes with a Z, VOATZ. And I led the study back in grad school to do an analysis of it. And for further context, this was during the pandemic. So people were trying to figure out how to allow people to vote from voters to cast their ballot from home, or in a way that was not going to end up with them getting COVID. Um, but unfortunately, like, the system was very broken, and the vendor was particularly hostile. They even wound up writing in a legal brief, an amicus brief to the Supreme Court, claiming that our study was incorrect, right? That the vulnerabilities that we found were not there, despite having previously actually hired an independent firm to do an independent analysis of their system, which confirmed all of the vulnerabilities that we found. So they still actually deny our findings even to this day, if you go ask them. Um, but all of this is kind of an aside, right? Cue the election security death spiral problem. Uh, I think you'd be kind of surprised to hear that actually the reaction from elections folks that we've seen from that were actually quite positive, largely because we took a ton of effort to actually go and talk to them privately about the whole thing. Um, Privately, someone told me, this is a thing that I think is hilarious, that I was the least objectionable computer scientist, which I guess is a compliment. I'll take it, I guess. But to being entirely honest with you, I felt like terrible throughout the entire process. It felt like, I don't know, it's how I imagine, like, being a doctor feels when they tell somebody that smoking cigarettes is going to give them cancer, right? Is like, hey, I'm here to tell you this terrible thing is true. I want to help you, but you're going to have to suffer through some bad press. This is going to not be great. It just felt awful. Like, it felt really, really bad, and that's part of the reason why I was inspired to look more into how to build systems that are better for elections, and try to get ahead of the doom spiral. Uh, hopefully hopefully in the future we're able to fix a lot of these problems
I think
earlier
that
on.
this research project is taking a bunch of really important steps in that direction.
Yeah, the important thing is that these people are not perpetrators of a system. They're the victims. They're the ones that are getting beaten up somewhat
Mhm.
unnecessarily, right?
Yeah. So Delaney, you're kind of parachuting into this in a sense, right? There's this long context, and we could talk about this for a lot longer too. But what's your perspective of this kind of bad blood relationship? It's not just computer scientists and election officials. I think it's also more generally academics. We'll just have to say that. But it really is something that I think has kept the computer scientists, in the last maybe 5 or so years from, I think, being heavily involved in making the kind of contribution that I think we need to improve elections in the US. So kind of what's your perspective on it, and what do you think it's going to take to try to resolve this problem of trust between your community and election officials?
Yes. Um, Two examples from our interview data actually come to mind. The first is whenever a new approach or system or anything new is introduced. Oh, we need more, we need to check these ballots more for this auditing system, or we have a new way of doing things. The election officials I spoke to felt like there was no consideration of what that labor actually looks like, what it takes to actually scale a solution. It's not just a state official. We're talking about hundreds of election officials across an entire state. And if the state has BMDs, that's almost double as many machines that might need to be updated or manually manipulated than if you just have tabulators and scanners. The labor and financial burden to make solutions is massive. And so when a paper says, why haven't you updated everything yet?
Mhm.
It gets me mad on behalf of election officials for not understanding the requirements to actually complete that sort of ask. And then a second one, I think, looking more positively on how do we fix this, I remember one participant telling me that they never respond to the national survey requests that they get in their inbox because there's no way a national survey or a ivory tower academic can understand the problems that I face. So that's why, and just kind of comparing this work to great former work doing large scale surveys of election officials, the reason why it's so important to get local and get face to face is to hear from those people that have that experience of there's no way people understand these challenges because they've been telling me to do these things and they just don't understand. So I think understanding and coalition building is so important to improve computer science and election official relations.
I think that's great. We're getting close to the end of the hour. One of the folks listening live here asked, is the paper available where they can read it somewhere?
It's not public yet. We got a bunch of really great feedback from folks that work in elections, and we wanted to incorporate that before we made it public. But that's going to happen very, very soon. So
Okay.
stay tuned.
Well, as soon as it's available, obviously let me know, and I'll do everything I can to help disseminate it because I will give my pitch for it, which is that thank you for giving me the opportunity to read this. I really think this is important work. I really think that, kind of engaging with election officials from this HCI perspective and understanding the usability of the process from their perspective, based on talking directly to them in this time is extremely important research. So I just wanted to thank you both for doing this research and for sharing it with me. Um, Actually, someone just asked, do you need more participants from the election community at this point? I think you might have a volunteer.
Absolutely.
So they should just email you directly. Is that the right way to proceed?
Please.
So if you're interested in getting involved in this research from the elections community, please email Delaney and Michael. They're easy to find at Georgia Tech. I also wanted to just say that I think, and this is more editorial, that what I found really important about this, Michael, is that, from a computer scientist perspective, to actually take this step, right? This is a bold step to take. It's not easy to go out and spend so much time really listening to people. It's a difficult kind of research for someone who's trained like you are. And I'm really impressed that you're doing that, and I'm really impressed that you're recruiting brilliant graduate students like Delaney to help you with this.
It is much of the credit for that goes to Delaney, who spent a lot of time editing transcripts and making sure they are correct and things like this. I am incredibly lucky to get to work with such fantastic graduate students, and I'm incredibly lucky for the collaborators that I have that spent a lot of time helping a lot with a lot of the sort of methodological questions and making sure that we had the right answers to how to do this properly. Also, there's fantastic folks at Georgia Tech that helped us make sure that we could do this safely, and make sure that folks weren't subjected to, for example, a subpoena or something like that, to get access to who actually answered our questions and things. So I am.
And thanks to our co-authors
Yes.
who helped us with methodology,
Josiah
experts
and
in
Navita.
HCI. Yes.
Now, we didn't talk too much about the co-authors, but you do have some fantastic co-authors in this project as well. And it'll be great. I don't know them. It'd be great at some point. Looking forward to meeting them at some point because they've done
And the feedback from folks in the elections community as well
Mhm.
has been incredibly impactful.
Great. And Delaney, I'll just say it's a real pleasure to meet you here. And you picked a wonderful advisor.
Thank you. I'm honored, and I feel lucky to be part of this lab.
Working. We look, I look forward to seeing more work from y'all on this in the future. So is there anything else that we haven't talked about? We got a couple of minutes left that you all wanted to raise about this research or some of the things we've talked about more generally? We've exhausted everything? No?
Probably not, but not coming to mind right now. It's a lot to digest.
Well,
We're trying to move mountains here.
one last question from the audience. Oh, okay. This is interesting. Let me just quickly see if we can get an answer to this one. With VVSG 2.0 and legislative pressure to mandate all electronics be limited to US only electronics, what does that imply for the future of election technology in US elections?
I don't quite know what this mandate is, the American only electronics mandate.
Yeah.
Certainly, it doesn't seem as though the entire supply chain, like physically, seems to be very difficult to do. We don't have sufficient foundries and things like that in the US, for example, to get chips and things like that
Yeah.
at scale. One of the things that I've learned in elections is that change is slow, and these new requirements take a very long time to filter down.
Mhm.
My biggest critique, although they fixed some of this with the VVSG, my biggest critique of the VVSG is that it slows a lot of the effort,
Mhm.
a lot of the potential improvements to election systems going forward. It's time consuming and long and expensive to get things verified correctly, and it's this strange monopoly with the Vistals.
Yeah.
I think a better mandate would be for more open source. So
Mhm.
force the vendors to provide their systems directly to us. Shout out to folks at Voting Works, creating open source voting systems. But also, this is a thing that us and the elections security community, computer scientists, can help out with. I would very much like our open source systems to be adopted in the real world and figure out how to get them used more often. Yeah, I don't know. I don't
I
have a
think
better
it's a
answer.
great pitch. I 100% endorse that as well. So, well, I think with that, we'll bring it to an end. I'm going to hit the stop recording button, but thank you both for being with me today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much.